You've already made the decision, or you thought you had. But then the question comes back. What if you got it wrong? What if there was a better option? What if the thing you chose leads to something you can't undo? And now you're thinking about it again, turning it over, examining it from a different angle, looking for something you might have missed. This is not careful thinking. This is overthinking, and it has very little to do with the decision itself. Overthinking has a particular texture. It feels productive, like you're doing something useful, like more analysis will eventually produce a clarity that has so far been elusive. But the clarity never quite arrives. Instead, the thinking generates more thinking, more scenarios, more variables, more reasons to be uncertain. And underneath all of it is a low-grade exhaustion that has nothing to do with what you've physically done today. Overthinking is not a flaw in reasoning. It's reasoning that has been given a problem it cannot solve. The brain's job is to anticipate, to model possible futures, to identify threats before they arrive. When something feels uncertain or unresolved, the brain returns to it, again and again. Not because it's broken, but because it hasn't found a satisfactory answer yet. Overthinking is the brain doing its job in a situation where its job cannot be completed. Psychologists call this rumination, the tendency to repetitively focus on negative or uncertain experiences without moving toward resolution. Research by psychologist Susan Nolan Hoeksema found that people who ruminate experience significantly higher rates of anxiety and depression than those who don't. Not because rumination causes distress directly, but because it keeps the mind locked on unresolved problems long after the moment of usefulness has passed. The thinking continues, but the thinking stops producing anything new. Much of overthinking is driven by a desire for certainty. If I think about this long enough, I will eventually know the right answer. If I consider every possible outcome, I will be protected from the worst ones. But this belief contains a fundamental error. Most of what we overthink is genuinely uncertain. Not uncertain because we haven't thought enough. Uncertain because the future hasn't happened yet. No amount of thinking can resolve what has not yet occurred. And so the mind keeps searching for a certainty that thinking alone cannot provide. Not all repetitive thinking is rumination. There's a distinction worth making between thinking that moves and thinking that circles. Thinking that moves produces new information, a different perspective, a concrete next step, something that wasn't there before. Thinking that circles returns to the same questions and produces the same answers or no answers at all. The test is simple. After spending time with a thought, do you know something new? Or are you simply more tired? You can't think your way out of overthinking. Telling the mind to stop is like telling water not to flow downhill. The energy has to go somewhere. What consistently interrupts rumination is not suppression. It's redirection. Physical movement, a task that requires genuine attention, a conversation that pulls focus outward. Something that gives the brain a different problem to solve, one that is concrete, immediate, and completable. The overthinking doesn't disappear. It loses its grip when the mind has somewhere else to be. Underneath most overthinking is a fear that the mind won't name directly. Not fear of making the wrong choice. Fear of living with the consequences of having chosen. Because choosing means committing. And committing means accepting that you cannot control what comes next. Overthinking is often a way of staying in the space before commitment, where all options still exist, where nothing has been foreclosed, where the future is still theoretically perfect. The loop continues not because the answer is missing, but because finding the answer means having to live with it. There's a cost to overthinking that rarely gets named. Not the exhaustion, not the anxiety, but the time. Every hour spent in the loop is an hour not spent moving in any direction at all. The mind mistakes motion for progress. But thinking about doing something and actually doing something are not the same. And at the end of the loop, the situation is rarely clearer, only more familiar. The mind that overthinks is not a weak mind. It's a thorough one that hasn't yet learned where thoroughness ends and suffering begins. At some point, the thinking has to stop, not because the answer is complete, but because living requires moving forward with incomplete information. That's not recklessness. That's what it means to be alive in an uncertain world. You will not think your way to certainty, but you can choose your way towards something. And that is enough to begin.